It's been a year since Christina McKelvie's death, a politician widely described as kind, warm and full of life, but also one whose legacy was defined as much by what she did as how she did it. From her working class roots in Easterhouse to ministerial office, she built a career focused on tackling inequality, whether that was advancing women's health, confronting violence and exploitation, or even reframing loneliness as a public health issue. In the days after her passing, her partner Keith Brown spoke movingly about the scale of the loss. Now, a year on, and ahead of a life celebration ball in her memory, he joins me to reflect not just on grief, but on what endures, the values she stood for, the change she drove, and the lessons her life leaves behind. Keith, thank you very much for joining me.
No problem.
It's been a year now since Christina passed. How have you been reflecting on that time?
I think initially, like many people, it's a pretty common story. You're initially consumed by what's just happened at the hospital and the difficulties of end-of-life care, and that plays very much on your mind. But over time, and meeting people repeatedly who've got stories to tell me about their experience of Christina, then you do start to focus on the impact that she's made on people's lives. Obviously, the biggest impact was for her immediate family, but everybody has a story about Christina, so that's helped move on to this idea of a celebration of her life.
I imagine it's been a very difficult year for you.
Yes, and difficult for her family as well, especially her two sons, Lewis and Jack. Never having experienced that kind of loss before. I suppose I had to some extent, but being older. But yes, it's a difficult thing to get through. But you do start to look towards the positive legacy that Christina's had, and that's a real source of comfort.
Let's touch on that positive legacy. When you think about Christina now, what are the things that come to mind first? Is it the personal memories or the work and causes she was so passionate about?
The two are interwoven. To understand Christina, growing up in Easterhouse, I've tried to point out all the different social justice campaigns and equality campaigns that she's involved in, but that all came back to her childhood. And she just could not see somebody being treated badly. All the more so if they were from a marginalised part of society, she would not see somebody being treated badly. And it wasn't a learned thing, if you like. It wasn't like adopting politics you'd learn at university or so on. It was just how she was. So, some of the most marginalised groups in society, like gypsy travellers, transgender people, she automatically gravitated towards those that she felt were most in need. So I think that's what comes across when you meet people now, talking to them. A woman that I met in the Highlands, quite a senior counsellor now, had bumped into Christina and she was very nervous, having just become a counsellor. And as with everybody, Christina gave her a big hug. She was famous for her hugs. And just said, "You're more than good enough, you can do this." And she was just that endless source of support, I think. So the two things are really interwoven, the impact that she had and why she had that impact in terms of social policy, but also in terms of the people she met and the impact she had on them.
You spoke very movingly in an emotion of condolence dedicated to Christina, and it always stuck with me, something that you said. You said something along the lines of, "Planets revolve around stars, and I don't know what a planet does when its star is gone." Thinking about her now, has your understanding of her legacy changed over that time of grief that you've had in the past year?
I think the point I was making was that planets can't be observed without stars. Stars are what provide the light, and certainly Christina, compared to me, was the bright shining light that kind of lit up the rest of us. But I think I understand more of her impact just from those conversations that you have with people. I've now gone to a number of events. I went to, for example, Friday night there to a choir in Stonehouse, a performance for a concert where the women's choir had gone to the Parliament at Christina's request. And actually, I didn't realise, but when she was in the Beatson, they'd actually sung down the phone to Christina when she was in the Beatson. But a very touching tribute was given to her at the choir, and you just constantly are meeting people who have these kind of stories. So everyone's got a bit of the picture, but the general picture is one of just a tremendously warm individual.
People often describe, like you said, as a tremendously warm individual. People often describe Christina as warm and passionate. But in politics right now, those qualities are sometimes underestimated. I mean, do you think that there could be a lot that people could learn from Christina in those qualities right now, if you were giving any advice to politicians potentially coming into Holyrood?
Yeah, I think what Christina managed to do was, she was absolutely tough as nails. She really was. She had a real core to her which could not be bent. But she managed to not have a hard exterior. You know, I don't think they have a scale for emotional intelligence the way they do have for mental intelligence. But if they did, she would be genius level for that. She was just, everybody could relate to her. And she made sure, with a conscious effort, I think sometimes, that she never developed that hard exterior, which you have to do sometimes in politics with if you're right in the front line. But she resisted that so that she could still, even with some of her more hardcore opponents, if you like, she always tried to remain human and being able to talk to people, which actually was a sentiment echoed by Nicola Sturgeon last week in her last speech in the Parliament. So, but she managed that. But if you went to the core of it, you'd realise that she was unbending. If she was wanting to defend her family or something very important to her, you could not get past that.
Do you worry that sort of kindness and compassion, despite being such a forceful and force of nature as a woman, do you worry that that's gone in politics today?
I do. I mean, I came off X or Twitter about a year and a half ago just because of the toxic nature of it, at least in the terms of the politics. I do worry about that, and I worry more for women. I know it can sound like a bit of a cliche now, but Christine was very much seized with the fact that you get a lot more abuse as a woman, you get a lot more personalised abuse, a lot of misogyny. And she was worried about the future of women in politics. She only agreed to stand down at the very point when she just could not conceive of recovering to the extent that she'd be able to continue her work while still having a secondary breast cancer. But she wanted to continue because she felt it was very important. We had done a lot of work to make sure that the Scottish National Party's MSP group at Holyrood had a majority of women. First party, I think, to have done that, the only party to have done that. And she was very pleased by that, but she was very concerned about the future of women in politics in particular.
I think we are seeing more women stepping aside from politics. Is that something that worries you, and the legacy that Christina tried to leave behind?
Yeah, and there's two or three which have surprised me, although the reasons given often by those women are to do with family, but I'm sure that the abuse which is there, sometimes unthinking abuse where people can be in the end of a keyboard and feel they can say whatever they want to say, some of the most hurtful, horrendous stuff, it has an impact, and part of the impact is on, as you say, women leaving politics, which I think is setting us back a number of years.
How much did, just turning now to Christina's background, how much did her, growing up in Easterhouse, her working class background shape her politics and how she believed in advancing rights and causes for communities?
Well, I think, first of all, it's quite a political background in Easterhouse. I remember Margaret Thatcher, one of her first expeditions as Prime Minister, was to come to Easterhouse, which made a big impact, as you can imagine, in Easterhouse. And she's very famous, Christina, for one of her quotes, which was, of course, in those days, the 70s, it was very much a gang culture. And she said, you either run really fast or you run with the gangs. And she learned to run really fast. She was with the Harriers, Shettleston Harriers, and was a very good runner. And she did make the point that at that stage in your life, you make a choice as to which path you want to follow, and she made that choice. But I think so. She was politics did inform her view, but she very quickly entered caring professions like nursing and social work, which I think give an indication of her character.
What do you think Christina did differently from others at Holyrood?
Well, one thing I would say is the Gypsy Traveller community, if you remember, a not to be named politician talking about the first thing that he would do, given the chance, would be to go after the Gypsy Traveller community if he became Prime Minister. And that gives you an idea of some of the prejudice that's there. And quite rightly, within the Gypsy Traveller community, a real defensiveness. Well, she broke right through that. She was, I remember hearing at her funeral from a representative from that community saying that she was treated like a queen. She went to a Gypsy Traveller site and all the kids formed up in two lines and cheered and applauded her when she came in because she had been an outspoken supporter. There's an area of my constituency which is a travellers camp which she helped to get the money to refurbish. So she did seem to be able to reach, and I think it was her sincerity and her warmth, which is not always evident in everybody involved in politics, but with her it came, she couldn't hide it. That's who she was.
And that sincerity and warmth, we need more of that. Definitely.
It's not easy to do in politics. As I've said before, you can shrink back into a shell, and I've been, that's a very long time now, so I probably have been in my shell for a long time, but it's easy to do that. But if you can come across to people as sincere and warm as Christina did, then you'll get the benefits of that.
I also want to turn around to the fact that Christina became a really prominent advocate and voice on women's health, including during her own illness. How important was that work for her personally?
Well, I remember we were due to go across to Amsterdam to see my son in March 2020, but she'd been getting briefings, private briefings about the oncoming COVID crisis, and she was, I would say, traumatised by what she was being told, as were John Swinney and others. They were just shocked by what was being proposed there. But she, of course, at that time had a responsibility for human rights, which was huge in terms of the COVID situation, and a very large part of that, of course, was women. But she'd also campaigned to have the breast screening campaign taken seriously, and to have the checks, and also to bring that age down. And of course, it was during her first breast screening under the government's programme that they discovered they had the lump the first time that she had cancer back in 2021. So, she was very concerned with women's health. We had many discussions about it. I'm far more educated on it than would otherwise be if I hadn't known Christina.
And do you feel like with her work around women's health, she would think that there's still a way to go in improving it right now?
Definitely. Things like endometriosis and breast cancer, obviously, and a number of other conditions. She was heavily involved in that, although, as I say, she never had a health portfolio, albeit she had drugs and alcohol, was one of her portfolios. But yes, I think there's an awful lot that we do very well, but there's still quite a lot to go.
And she would have liked to see that. And that's part of her legacy to kind of want and further the betterment of women's health. She worked on a wide range of issues. I'm just reading here, from Clare's Law, which enables the disclosure of a partner's past violent or abusive behaviour, to, things such as someone at risk, to tackling loneliness. Which of those do you think was the most lasting, that had the most lasting impact?
Well, I think in terms of the loneliness initiative, I think it possibly did amongst those that were exposed to it. It's still an issue of trying to get more exposure for that issue. It's a huge thing, both men and women, especially in older age. But it's when she got that job, which had responsibility for it, Minister for Older People, that she really started to understand and take that more seriously. So a lot of the organisations that she dealt with, they're much more forward in their thinking about it and advancing it into the political agenda than was the case before. I think there's still a great deal more to do in relation to that. And again, with Christina, it was informed by her own experiences as well. So it always had that grounding in real life.
Like you mentioned, Christina, in ways, was a trailblazer on these issues. Do you think there's still so much work to be done in her memory on areas like loneliness? We mentioned women's health. Is there a specific topic that comes to mind when you think of that?
I think if I was to put it into one word, it would be equalities generally. Equalities, because whether it's was very committed to trans rights, a tiny proportion of society who are not treated well by society. Women's rights, the majority of society, still not treated right, and she was always committed to that, a convinced feminist throughout her life. And yes, you would definitely say there's much further to go in terms of women's rights. But I mentioned Gypsy Travellers as well. There's more to be done in relation to that. So yes, I think there's no question. LGBTQ rights. She was the one that convinced, I think, both the current First Minister and Mike Russell to go to Pride events. She made sure they went there. And actually, going back to breast cancer, you may know that for the 18 years that Christina was in the Parliament, I think for 17 of those, she'd hosted the Wear It Pink for Breast Cancer campaign, which meant you dragged as many MSPs down to a committee room, made them put on ridiculous pink things and get photographs taken. But she did that for 17 years.
We remember a lot of John Swinney pictures, the big pink sunglasses and things like that.
Well, just be glad you haven't seen the ones of me, because I just don't have that coordination. That was the other thing with Christina. One of the things I've noticed, she was always a good check on what I was wearing and what I was eating, actually, and not having that check anymore led me down some blind alleys, right enough. But she was involved in that for 17 years, and so one of the charities that's going to benefit from the commemorative event will be breast cancer now. The others being Maggie's as well, who are very helpful to her.
Well, let's turn to that life celebration ball taking place, and you can correct me here, Keith, on the 4th of April.
That's right. Yeah.
Talk it through with me. What is the life celebration ball?
Well, I think, in my mind, and I know that's not a view, this is not a view shared by everybody, but I put Christine up there with the likes of Mary Barber as a social reformer. I mean, her spectrum was wider. It wasn't in relation to housing specifically, but it was in relation to equalities. And I think she tapped into that very Scottish idea of, that's no right. I'm not going to see that happen. I'm going to do something about it. And I mentioned in the Parliament at the time when she was aware of this young woman that had a baby but had no money for a pram, and she went and bought a pram and various other things she could not see people being done down, if you like. So for that reason, and for all the work that she's done in equalities, and also for some of the stuff I heard immediately after Christina passed, individual stories of people telling me how supportive she'd been, I just thought this is something we should remember. So it's two things on the right. One will be a very personal thing for her family, of course. Her sons, Lewis and Jack, her brother David, and her wider family, her best pal and cousin Janice. Will be a personal reflection of that, but it's to be more of an upbeat affair, celebrating all that she managed to achieve. I just don't think we'd do ourselves any good if we allowed ourselves to forget about the impact that she had.
Noticed from reading a bit about the Life Celebration Ball, themes like equality, social justice and diversity really take centre stage, hopefully on the night. How consciously did you want it to reflect the causes she fought for?
Well, I wanted it to be, as I said, a celebration. I was asked, as some will remember, whether it should be a black tie event. I said, no, it's the last thing in the world it should be. Christina used to compete with Christine Graham as to who had the biggest brooch on in the Parliament, and Margaret MacDonald, and she was bright and just a ray of something. When people met her, they felt better immediately, I think. So it was to make sure it was true to that. So I've got this utterly absurd, lacking in taste jacket that I'll be wearing on the night.
Brilliant. Can you give us a flavour for what it will look like?
It's not going to be pink. It was going to be, but neither will I be wearing the green cowboy boots that Christina bought me for my last birthday before she passed, because it just wouldn't go with this thing that I'm going to wear. A bit like Joseph in his Technicolor dream coat, I think. But so we want to make sure it's upbeat and it's a happy affair, and it is to be a celebration of her life. We'll have a fantastic video. There was one produced by TIE, which is Time for Inclusive Education, the campaign who had their 10-year anniversary, an absolutely stunning tribute to Christina. It's going to be a bright, upbeat affair, and we'll have Nicola Sturgeon there speaking, and Susie McKay, Billy C. Smith, people like that.
It's also quite a forward-looking event. There will also be an award, I believe. Can you tell us a wee bit about that?
Yeah, the award is really for nominees in terms of what they've done in equality. This has been a tough time, I feel, and certainly Christina felt that the work that's been done by people in equalities, especially since the 60s, has been rowed back upon. And at the very point of that is the transgender community. But I think the whole LGBTQ community is worried and scared now because of some of what they're saying. So it was to be, the night was to be about that, and the award is to be about equalities. However, there's also a mentorship programme which we've established through the SNP, the Christina McKelvie Mentorship Programme for women getting involved in politics. So I'm confident those two things will help to contribute to our memory lingering on.
Sort of from both of those areas that you've spoken about, it seems like a coming together. There's been a lot of polarisation potentially around those issues like trans rights that you've mentioned. Is that the aim? Well,
it wasn't an explicit aim in so much, but I'm very pleased that we've got, for example, Anna Sarwar and Jackie Bailey are coming along on the night. We have people from other parties as well. Edward Mountain, the Conservative, can't make it, but he's made a very kind donation. He went through his own cancer journey at the same time as Christina. So somewhat unlikely people involved in this. But I do think that does speak, and the fact it's happening before we really get armed to the teeth ready for the election campaign, to have people together to celebrate something is probably quite important. And if you heard Nicola Sturgeon's speech last week in Parliament, she has said, we have to stop treating our political opponents as our enemies and think more of them as our colleagues. It's much easier to say than to do, especially during an election campaign. But I heard the same message actually at Jean Freeman's memorial. Jean Freeman was not a tribal politician, and I have to concede that I probably have been accused of being that in the past, but I think it's no bad thing to have a bit of self-reflection and see if we can all be a bit more like Christina.
That legacy of Christina, maybe looking at cross-party work, is that fair to say?
Yes, I mean, she did that. She reached out in all the jobs that she had in government, and I know I'm saying that, and I'm her partner, but I think everybody in the Parliament would say the same thing as well. She generally reached out, tried to achieve consensus. She didn't like the bitterness of politics at all. She could stand her ground and tried to introduce humour, including during one of her speeches when she mentioned virtually every ABBA song way back in 2008, I think it was. So she tried to be, and tried to maintain cordial relationships with everybody if she could.
So, ahead of the Holyrood election, this event might allow those in politics to take a moment to think, hang on, we don't need all this tribalism. We can come together in a lot of issues.
I would certainly hope that's true of those that are able to attend. We still have very few tickets left if people want to come, but how we get that message out to the wider public is an issue. But we're going to have quite a lot of senior politicians at the event, including, as I mentioned, Anna Sarwar, Jackie Bailey, people from the Lib Dems as well, Jamie Green and others. And hopefully we can transmit that message.
I just want to touch on finally, Keith, when you think about Christina McKelvie now, obviously this event is to keep her legacy going. What do you hope people most remember about Christina?
I think her warmth, which is what they say, the warmth, the hug, let's go for a cup of tea, but the really serious work that she did in helping people improve their lives, especially those that needed that help the most. That's always who she focused on, whether Gypsy travellers, whether LGBTQ community, that's who she focused on. And she realised we're a better society if those that have got the biggest challenges to face can be helped. We all benefit from doing that. So I would like to think that, I think for a lot of women, it will be the work she did for women. They'll very much focus on that. But for the Gypsy traveller community, they'll say it was the work that she did for them. But so I would hope they would remember that she was always a campaigner for those that needed campaigns to help them improve their lot in life. And
obviously, as your partner, Keith, there will be a lot of personal legacy-defining moments for you that you will keep close to your heart. But for yourself as a politician, what does her legacy mean to you?
I think it's almost the same thing. I do think I became a better politician because of Christina. She, if you like, took some of the sharp edges off, and she was the one that would say not to get too personally embroiled in things, to try and see past the opponent that you've got. So as in life, she taught me a great deal about emotional intelligence. She also taught me a lot about how to conduct yourself in politics. So I'll try and stay true to that. I'll be one of the more senior members, if you like, if I can put it that way, in the Parliament if I'm re-elected. And I would hope to be a credit to Christina in the way I conduct myself.
Keith Brown, thank you very much for sharing your memories of Christina McKelvie with us on the Herald's Unspun Life podcast.
Thank you.